Betsy is joining by Zoom.
Okay.
Good. I haven't seen Jillian yet, but I'll watch for her.
Okay, let's do the roll call.
Here.
Ben,
Present.
Tom, here, Peter,
Yes.
Harry. Present. Counselor Cook,
Here.
and we have Betsy via Zoom.
Hi, everybody. I'm back and around the corner. I'm just waiting for my husband to get back and I'll join you over there.
Oh, great. Well, welcome back.
Thanks.
And Tracy is not with us. So,
Oh, there's someone in the waiting room still.
oh, Fred.
Yeah, Fred. Who's on sustainability, so.
I wasn't sure if. Oh, he's not speaking.
Welcome, Tracy.
Hi.
We won't be too long a meeting tonight. We had hoped to have an NREL win solution, some things that would be actionable for us. They do basically have the results, but it's not available to us yet. We got a preview, so we'll get into that. So that since that's not actionable, I think we'll give you a cursory look at it. And also, I don't know if this was the case at our last meeting, but Tom Rooney has agreed to be a director of CPCNH.
Maybe.
Oh, you have to be voted,
Voted, yeah. Good.
which is great. Strong presence with Kevin, and so now we're back on the board. Have eyes and ears. What's happening? Have we got, has anyone not had a chance to read the minutes? Okay. Looking for a motion to approve.
These are the March 4th minutes.
So moved.
Okay, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I might, Ben had some comments about the February minutes
I did.
that we never addressed, and I don't know how you want to take that up.
Okay.
I have them as a PDF. Unfortunately, I don't have them in an editable format. How would you like to proceed? You want to look at the PDF?
Sure. Thank you. Were we copied on that? Okay.
We voted on the minutes last time and Ben didn't have a chance to express his.
Dive into it. Thanks in advance, Tom, for your commitment of time.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see what, I think it's a few more with the member meeting in a few weeks.
People.
Yeah.
I think I read there was like 6 or 7 open boards.
Yeah, it was hard to tell, right, because there's a number of people coming back, which I would imagine they would probably get on.
Yeah.
But outside of them, I don't know how many are wide open. So we'll see.
Excellent.
And well, Stephanie's, okay, go ahead, Steph.
Betsy, can you see that? Oh, wait.
I can. Yep.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So the concern was.
On item number 4, There are several bullet points,
Mm-hmm.
and I have suggested striking the bullet that starts with "This was CPCNH's first actively managed power deal," because it's redundant with the bullet 3 above. Under number 5, there was a statement attributed to me that this would be privatization and non-competitive, but I'd like to strike that piece, and I would just like to leave it and strike the second sentence of 5, first bullet, assuming the collection of losses overlooks frequent actions to rebate collections to customers, to just read, Ben would like to see CPCNH language less hyperbolic and conclusory. Those were my adjustments to the minutes from
I
February.
remember you saying that.
And just to make sure I have everything, you wanted to strike the sentence assuming the collection?
Please.
Okay, got it. So I will correct those. What's the parliamentary procedure for then approving amended minutes? Should we do that at the next meeting? Or should I post amended minutes on the website?
Good question. I would think we would move to amend the old minutes.
Okay,
So
somebody want a motion?
Move to amend the February 5th meeting minutes and adopt as amended.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Appreciate the committee's indulgence. I had sent in these suggestions over the weekend before that last meeting, and I think I joined a minute or two late and was on the computer.
It reminded me too, Ben, that when Bill Baber was talking last week at his conclusion, you had a pretty strong kind of disagreement with some elements of what he was saying, and I don't think that was reflected in the minutes. We didn't get into it at all, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something you wanted to elaborate on or at another point in time.
Mr. Chair?
now would be a good time.
Okay.
We didn't include this, excuse me, I should ask to speak. The minutes did not include the side conversation about how CPCNH is structured and all of that. It was strictly, the minutes reflect the conversation about the solar. So.
So
that-
did we leave out, it was, what was pertinent was, it was the conversation about HB 760 and the
Right.
utilities spreading losses.
So I do have that captured, but it's not in the minutes. The minutes are the solar conversation.
Okay, so it's not even in.
So it's not part of the minutes anyway.
But I know I raised an eyebrow, so if you wanted to explain that.
Sure. So going back to some materials we had seen in the February timeframe that came out from CPCNH discussing certain activities, I identified 2 statements in some of their material that I found to be hyperbolic and conclusory. I explained to the committee at the time that the statements were not supported by any facts and that they were just going too far with the rhetoric. And I felt that Mr. Baber, when he started talking about his role as part of the, I don't know, public affairs or whatever committee that he's on with CPCNH and discussing the pending legislation, I felt that there was again an unfortunate engagement in invective, and didn't appreciate some of the ad hominem, and I didn't appreciate some of the logical fallacy. And I fully support CPCNH's goals and what they're trying to do. And in my opinion, I think CPCNH's role is to provide more options that are lower cost of energy supply. Their job is to do energy supply. That's number 1. Well, we know that something happened, and I'm an insider. I can't imagine someone trying to enter into a contract with that particular facility. I mean, have you not read the newspaper about the contracts in the government over the last 10 years? But be that as it may, We now have rates that are higher than the default service, which I think we also probably should have considered pausing contributions to the reserve fund at the time to maintain our ability to stay competitive. I don't know why we kept going with reserve building. But at the same time that, in my opinion, CPCNH dropped the ball on its most important job, it's engaging in legislative activity, which to me is a nice to have. And when you're engaging in legislative activity, not everyone agrees with you. And when you resort to half-informed opinions that impugn the credibility of PUC commissioners, ascribe ulterior motives to a utility company, I take umbrage to that. I work for a utility company. I spend all of my time working on clean energy, and I don't appreciate people that disagree with you attacking your motives. So I would like it if CPCNH could focus on the job of doing supply right, doing active management right, and maybe tone down some of the hyperbolic rhetoric in some of its marketing materials and or, lobbying activities. I get it. I just don't appreciate the invective. So I wanted to go on record. Felt like he'd mischaracterized how the basic service procurement was done. Thank you. Luckily, we had someone in the room that knows how it's done. I'll just say that the utility makes $0 on basic service. 0. And if you go back to restructuring, the whole point was to have everybody on third-party supply. And almost no one has gone on third-party supply because the metering and the rates aren't there and other institutional barriers. And CPCNH is a good movement towards progress, towards realizing the vision of restructuring, of having people on third-party supply. But there still is a need for the utility to provide basic service or service of last resort or whatever you want to call it. It's called different things in different states. And the way that it's required by law to procure energy is dumb and more expensive than a savvy investor would do. So CPCNH has a very easy ability to go in and skim off that cream, which is great. Let's do that. And now that there are efforts to try to change the way that procurement is done by the utility to try to also capture some benefits for people that haven't migrated to third-party supply, but knowing that that also has volatility and exposure, it seems like the CPCNH's position is that the utility that makes nothing off of this, that's only following the law, should also put shareholder dollars at risk when things go against it. And I don't understand that.
I don't think that's the issue though. Isn't the issue that they want to spread it beyond people that take default service?
Or eat it.
Well, they want to put it on the transmission distribution part of the bill, right? Which goes to everybody.
Right.
So what Tom's saying is that those are not customers of the utility. They're customers who are provided with the distribution transmission from the utility. But if I understand correctly, and I read the comments from Don Kreese, the consumer advocate, where in fact, CPN, our coalition goes out and gets a bid. And if they get it wrong, nobody bails them out later on. Whereas the utility can go and say to the PUC, look, we got this, we thought we were getting it at this price. We lost money on it. We want you to compensate us in the next round. We can't do that. Our coalition can't do that.
Right.
We have to eat the contract that just happened. They have to do something to manage it.
Right.
And Eversource can go to you to the PUC and say, hey, that didn't work out for us. Help us bail us out with a couple extra cents later or whatever. That's the power they have. And, there's a lot of issues with the PUC commissioners in general, many of whom are not competent to do what they're doing. So, I mean, I have some issues with them, but I think the comments that you made, and they might be very, very well surrounded. If we're gonna discuss these comments, then we need to hear both sides of that version. What you're saying, if we're saying that's hyperbolical, let's hear the other side. What do they say? Is that hyperbolical or not?
Sure.
I mean, listening to Don Kreese's comments or reading his comments didn't sound to me like It was that it sounded to me like the PUC is bending over backwards to accommodate the utility. And I understand, I was up there for 6 years. I had regular contact with the Eversource people.
Mhm.
And I understand their dilemma because, their business model used to be based on both selling power and maintaining
Mhm.
the service. And now it's all about just maintaining the service.
That's right.
And you can't do too well with that. And Eversource operates differently in Massachusetts, for example. They do so many more things in Massachusetts they're not allowed to do in New Hampshire.
Uh-huh.
So if they can make more money off of that, and rightfully so. So I think there's a bunch of stuff that's mixed up in all this stuff. But I think the main issue that I see is the issue of who takes the risk.
Mhm.
When you buy something and you say you're going to pass it on, and you're right, they pass it on with zero profit on the energy supply. And our coalition has to do the same thing, but
Mhm.
if we don't get it right, there's nobody to bail us out except our customers.
Mhm.
And that's a little different than what the default utility has.
Understood.
Yeah.
The utility is required by law
I know.
to
Yeah,
do what they
absolutely.
do.
And we need them,
They don't want to do
And we need
basic
them.
service.
but.
But it
wait,
sounds like you're putting CPCNH as a market participant on the same footing as the utility that is just following state law.
I get it. And you're
Follow
right.
state
You're
law in
absolutely right.
Massachusetts, follow state law in New Hampshire. So I feel like there's a false
know, there's
equivalence. in
different
that-
states with different laws. But I gotta add one other thing. One thing that our coalition does do is it offers people the option of having more green energy, which Eversource does not, or our default utilities don't offer us this option because by law, they're supposed to get the cheapest power no matter what, right?
Mhm.
And it's not their fault because they offer more options to people in Massachusetts than here. But here it's like they're required to do this.
Mhm.
That's it.
Other discussion. I know from my own part, there just seems to be an imbalance. Like the coalition, if we fell short, if our rate didn't cover the cost of our purchases, we couldn't go to Eversource's rate base. So that seems an imbalance. To me.
And again, I think you're starting from the position that they should be treated equally.
Well,
Yes.
from
I-
the supply side,
I
they
reject
should.
that premise.
From the supply side, they should. Why, I mean, why wouldn't they, just for the default service, forget everything else? If you're gonna buy default service, or CPCNH or standard power, they should all be at the same risk. Right?
If you want to truly have them compete equally, shouldn't you take all restrictions off of both? Right now, CPCNH is not prescribed by law to procure power in a certain way.
Yeah, and I think that's the point you're getting to,
Well-
Ben. I mean, we're talking about
It's apples and
power
oranges.
supply from CNH and Eversource is not the same.
Oh,
Well,
And-
yeah, the issue isn't that, I don't really care if they could buy the exact same way. The thing is, they can only get it back from the people that they're selling to. That's the issue at hand. It's not, I mean, if they can be more competitive, yeah, I mean, that's not ideal for CPCNH. I think what threatens their livelihood is if default service can go back out to everyone else and say, we made a mistake. It's not just, so now I buy from CPCNH, but I'm still gonna pick up the difference for the under collection on default service. That doesn't seem right.
agree to disagree.
I think that
And
you-
there's the two sides of it.
But the utilities, I think this statement that they're making is that this is not fair and that legislators should take a look at this. And is there a way to correct that imbalance?
And they are very
Legislature.
influential lobbyists, the legislature, Eversources.
Yeah.
I can tell you that firsthand.
I
I see
believe it.
both sides.
It's, I know, Mike.
I don't see the motivation in changing any of the processes that we've been under if the cost is just passed on. And if the utilities aren't making any money at all on power supply, then why change the buying process that we've been under? You know, why put them in a position that they're having to leverage the market and try to find better value in purchasing power in a not quite the same way that community power does, but why change it at all if they're just passing on costs? Because it creates risk that they haven't been under. So why not just leave it as it is?
I think
That's-
there's some attempt at, if you just go back 2 years, when they had to purchase in that December, when it was 22 and 24 and 26 cents a kilowatt. And then the utility customers were subject to that incredibly high price for 6 months because the utilities are forced to go into the
Mhm.
market at a prescribed time, just twice a year and within a few week period twice. And, you know, there were back to back, I think, rate periods, council, where the utility customers were subject to incredibly high prices. And it was at the same time, CPC&H was fortunate in terms of going live and being able to take advantage of a different
Mhm.
market.
Yeah.
And got them off to a nice start compared to the utilities. But I think the changes they're recently made are in some way, and I don't know if it's intelligent or not, an effort to in part address that in some fashion.
Mhm.
But it's clearly their hands are still tied
Mhm.
compared to CPC&H that's operating in can manage her portfolio the way it sees fit. Hopefully does it well.
Ben, can I just ask you, do I understand correctly? If I'm not mistaken, and just to Councilor Cook's comments about the utility has to pass it on to their customer at the price, the supply cost that they quoted to them for the next 6 months, okay? But that doesn't, when we're saying they're not making profit on it, that doesn't exclude them making losses on it. Okay, and if they lose on that somehow because the pricing that they have actually loses them money on the supply side, isn't that the issue that they're trying to recover through the distribution transmission costs? That's my impression. I don't know. Is that correct?
I mean, is this a cost allocation question only? Or is it
Well-
that there's different rules for different market participants question?
Okay, I don't know. And I know that my conversations with Eversource when I was still legislator were always that the problem that Eversource faces as a business in New Hampshire is that if you compare it to, let's say, Green Mountain Power in Vermont, which has decided to be an all energy supplier for anything you want, energy related, they're going to make profit on everything, whether they send you a mini split or whatever. You come to us for energy, we'll sell you whatever you want and it'll be on your bill and all, and they're making money off of that. They're not restricted as much in the way they operate like they are, like Eversource is here in New Hampshire. So it seems to me it's a matter of the business model they have or are forced to have in New Hampshire versus in other states where they are doing more.
Fair.
So I think
Counselor.
that there's another element to this in New Hampshire. It's a power of information. So we wouldn't have to go down this road to have to correct this with high energy prices if we had a model that was more customer friendly on selection of power supply. So in other states, when you sign up for your power supply, when you're doing that, you are given the option immediately of choosing a power supplier. Whereas in New Hampshire, it's almost backwards. You have to opt in. You have to search out that information and you're automatically put on the default. So we wouldn't be trying to fix a problem of this purchasing issue if we provided better resources to our residents on choosing power supply in the first place. So.
I personally know the folks that do the basic service buying in all 3 states. And it's not Eversource's fault that the laws in New Hampshire are different than the laws in other states. That's it. Don't appreciate the invective.
Yeah, and did we convey, when you made those concerns about invective and conclusory statements, did we pass that on as you had hoped in the letter that we sent to him, asking for questions to be answered?
Appreciated the questions that we're trying to learn about, what had happened with the first actively managed supply deal. I wasn't aware of any other feedback around, rhetoric.
I remember trying to get some of that in, but
And I would just add to your description of the fact that this your supplier, the biomass plant we're talking about here, that, I mean, I was there for 6 years when it was going back and forth between what the state can do, what Eversource has to do, what price they have to buy it at, and so forth, how much we have to help them with. And all of that is definitely very, kind of a back and forth, from each year was different. But, as a legislator or someone in charge like the PUC, the other part was that those plants in the North Country were incredible dynamos in the local economy up there, which is very struggling. So that component was not part of all the deliberation. It's all about the prices, what they could sell at, what they can get for it, who owns it, and so forth. But the impact of the economies up in the North Country are so dramatic that there's a good case to be made. And I know I asked Senator Bradley, I said, as a senator, isn't your first responsibility to take care of your constituents? And those constituents will be suffering if you don't support keeping these facilities going under whatever conditions are feasible. And he said, absolutely. So, that's another component that's not directly Eversource's problem or about the rates. It's about the impact of these things on local communities in areas where there's not a whole lot of economy going.
Understood.
I just would also like to say to thank Ben for your tremendous amount of industry knowledge, which is really valuable to us on this committee. And strong viewpoints, strongly held, backed up by deep industry knowledge. Though we may not all agree, it's valuable to what we're doing here. Great.
And I think, Ben, when you make such comments or questions, I think we should hear a response from the coalition about these issues, what they say to it.
Great.
Pro or con, whatever,
Sure.
because we shouldn't just leave it out there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And we still need a vote on amending and adopting the revised minutes. I think we had a motion and a second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for the discussion. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. No, it's important. So we actually saw some wonderful slides about wind options for the two sewer plants and the Madbury water plant. Herb, you want to just give us a?
Yeah,
overview?
I've got some notes here that I'm happy to share with everyone. So we met with NREL last week and went through a review of where their assessment has led them so far. The three sites that are in the analysis or in the technical assessment are Pierce Island, Pease, and Madbury. So those are still in the running for this. And we primarily were looking at wind because DPW early on came back and said that they didn't need any assistance with solar. They said, if we want to do a solar project, the city knows how to do solar, and DPW, we know we can reach out to the experts and do it. So fair enough, we really focused on wind turbines. And NREL presented last week their turbine modeling and where they're at so far, which is, I think it's pretty much done. They showed us 4 different sizes of wind turbines, everything from, I don't know if you remember the exact meters, but they were the diameters, everything from probably, I'm going to say like 12-foot diameter up to
39 meters.
39 meters. And so, yeah, there was a wide
That was
range.
the shoot the moon option.
Yeah, exactly. They are in their model are only going to present the turbines that NREL has certified. So they're just going to give us an idea of we know these turbines work because we've gone through their certification program. We did ask them about putting in a series of smaller turbines versus say one big turbine. And they told us that the economics don't work out for multiple small turbines. You're better off putting in one larger turbine than two or three smaller ones.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you say certified, does that include the wind conditions that we expect at that location? I mean, it's one thing for the technical turbine to work. If there's no wind, nothing happens. So is this including their view of what the wind conditions are available there?
That's a great question. So they, NREL has a certification program for the hardware for the turbines themselves.
Yeah.
Not considering where they're located. right?
Okay.
So not
Okay, so
factoring
just
that
the-
in. So just that
the
actual
mechanical-
hardware, they go through it from an engineering and a
Mhm.
mechanical perspective. And sign off to say, it's like the good housekeeping seal of wind turbines.
Okay.
Like a UL kind of.
Yeah.
But they did when they predicted the energy output, use real wind data
From our sites.
from all four sites.
Oh, from all four
Well,
sites.
they looked at real wind data and we provided them the different locations and there's a air monitoring station
Yeah. I know.
out here in
Yep,
Pierce Island.
yep.
They did come back and say that unfortunately that the height of all of that wind collection instruments was
They're very
too
low.
low.
Yes, it's low.
So they have modeling data that they use.
Can use to project the height,
Yeah, I can't remember. What was the average height? Something like 30 meters, I think is about,
100 yards,
I can't
100 feet.
remember. We'd have to see when we get the final slides.
I think there was something about 30 meters,
Okay, so 100 feet.
what they were predicting.
Right.
The modeling showed, I think we probably knew it was going to show us, but the wind at Pierce Island is very good. The wind at Pease is still very good, but not
No, that's good.
quite as high. And Madbury,
How is that?
and so when they started putting numbers to it, I think, and if I overgeneralize, please, Counselor, correct me, but economically, the viability of Madbury doesn't look very good on wind alone.
Mhm.
So during the meeting that we had, we started asking about solar. And they said, wow, if you put together a project that is wind and solar, then the viability goes up because solar can be very, have a very short return on investment.
Mhm.
And part coupled up with wind, where obviously when the sun is not shining, you're still getting value out of that. So the projects that pair the two together is an area that they were saying could be very advantageous for us. So that was one of the takeaways from the meeting was they're going to go back and look at the footprint for these sites. Pierce Island has virtually no footprint for solar. And DPW made that clear, and they
Ah.
said even on the tops of any of the buildings out there, there's really no space.
You could hang it on the side. It's the only,
Right.
I've seen them hung off the side of like parking garages. That's about
Yeah.
the,
Yeah. And Eric's part of the working group,
Yeah.
and so, he's like, oh, there's really just not much. So he encouraged them to see what they could figure out, but there definitely is footprint, there's space both at Pease and in Madbury. Madbury's already got a solar array, but there's no shortage of space out there. So that was one of the action items that they walked away with is, okay, let's look at how much solar could we add in combination with a turbine and what do the numbers look like, the financials. And they have a couple different models that they use on the financial side. It looks to be fairly sophisticated.
Yes.
once we get the final report, we can dig into it more. But at least the slides they showed and what they presented, it sounds.
Right.
Sounds like they know what they're doing.
Yeah, no, they had payback periods for each of the different options. Which was kind of neat to see. Obviously, the question we face in the community on Pierce Island is how big is too big? You know? I'm sure a lot of us in this room would like to generate a lot of megawatts, but that may not be how the folks in the south end feel about it.
That's right.
So.
If it doesn't blow the fumes over to their neighborhood. You know?
Question for you, Herb. Do you know if the analysis of the Pease site included potential interactions with the flight pattern
Yes.
Oh,
and some of the turbulence associated with
Mm.
the flight path there?
Yeah, so NREL worked on a project recently at Burlington Airport in Vermont.
Okay.
And apparently the turbine that they installed there is on airport property and closer to the flight line.
Hmm.
And so they have some experience with that.
Right.
They're not gonna tell us whether we could get approval or not,
Sure.
but they are putting together the information and teeing up for us what we would need to do to submit. There's a process where you submit your intention.
Yep.
And the FAA, they come back and they don't tell you, we will approve this, but they will give you kind of a gauge of how comfortable they feel with your project, your proposed project. And so they recommended that that could be a next step for us if we did want to move in that direction.
Thank you.
And Counselor, how would something like that play out from a citizen standpoint in terms of gathering support or not gathering support?
Well, I was thinking about that. I think you need some gauge of community sentiment around this.
Yeah.
And whether that's flash vote or some kind of survey, and it'd have to be a very public process. And then again, I think we have to see what the final numbers are in terms of cost and benefit too. Another level that we asked them to do was, rather than having the sewer department strictly bond for it, what if we didn't finance it, we had a developer finance it. And we got a preferable rate for electricity out of it. So that way you don't have to take on bonded debt. And that was not part of their model. So we'll see if we'll run those numbers and see how those work.
So we gave that to them as an action item. And they, as Counselor said, they're adding that into their modeling. What does that look like? What if it costs the city absolutely nothing out of pocket, but now we're a driver in producing clean energy?
Well, and hopefully at a lower price than.
A lower price than what we could get in the open market. And to pull on that even further, there were questions by the group about what if we say after X number of years bought out the wind turbine or the solar array.
Right. That was a good question that Peter Britt said.
Yeah, what's the O&M on something like that? I mean, how much would it cost the city to support or maintain a large wind turbine? So if we did put something over at Pease, for example.
Right.
what
After
would that-
6 or 7 years, maybe it's a favorable situation to buy it after
Yeah.
that.
But if we bought it, at least, making sure that in that model is factored in what the maintenance costs would be for the city once they did own it.
Right.
A good question.
But I was impressed with both their engineering skill at modeling it, and they had some pretty good financial skill. Counselor?
I think that the exercise is really helpful. I think the political reality is much harder than probably most people in this room realize. I mean, if it is visible from Prescott Park, from the water, I just know people are freaking out about the visibility of wind turbines offshore 10 miles. The idea that we would be able to put one right in the harbor is just.
Yeah, nobody in the working group feels that Pierce Island is a viable option.
Yeah.
But I think a question is there an opportunity at Pease for a smaller wind turbine coupled with a solar array? I mean, maybe that has stronger legs to it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. We'll have to see if the numbers were very compelling for Pierce Island, then we'd have to do a gut check of whether we think we could take this out to the community or not. And
Without
maybe we don't,
Without getting egged.
right? But on the other hand, you don't want to chase dreams that aren't going to happen.
I just want to comment about the people freaking out about the offshore wind. Nobody's freaking out. There's a couple of groups who are adamantly against it not because they can see it, but because they know it's going to be there. These things are 50 miles off coast. Nobody can see these wind turbines. And somebody pointed out, complaining from Hampton Beach, oh my gosh, I might be able to see from the beach. Well, turn around you can see nuclear reactor right behind you. What, a mile away? And you're worried about something 25 to 30 miles out on the ocean, which you can't see without on the naked eye. That is ridiculous. But people do that, and the fishing industry has put up all kinds of phony baloney. I was on the Offshore Wind Commission for many years. It's always the same people, and they're not really credible. I mean, most people can't see these things, Even the guys on Martha's Vineyard could not see those turbines, but they had influence. So I don't know if there's a lot of people complaining about it. It's less than one thinks. But I raised the other issue is under the current political environment right now. And possibly that offshore wind, those projects being killed by the current administration. Not that has anything to do with the wind turbines themselves, but I'm wondering, as much as NREL is helping us here, whether we're dependent on federal money in some ways to help support these projects. Because if that's the case, then I'm not too optimistic about any of it. And I would suggest that maybe under the current atmosphere, it's more worthwhile focusing on energy efficiency. In other words, reducing consumption, which is just as good or better for greenhouse gas emissions and money, as trying to create new supply.
Right.
Because I think the new supply is not going to get supported by this administration. And I don't think we should go out on the limb for something that doesn't look viable at all financially, especially as a city.
I don't recall a lot of federal funding and what they were discussing.
IRA funds
Oh,
are factored in, yeah.
Uh-huh.
But
that's,
NREL did say that there are other funding options besides IRA, like the Infrastructure Act.
Mhm.
I think that has for seacoast resiliency
Mhm.
for new municipalities. So they did allude to the fact that there may be some other funding options, and it may not be the only one.
Okay.
But I think to respond to your question about energy efficiency, to me, it feels like the city is already taking on that initiative with the contract that they've signed, what the work that they've already done, and the contract that they've signed moving forward for this building and others.
Mhm.
And maybe they're not moving as fast as we would like for them to move, but it's still positive that. the
Oh, yeah,
city
yeah, yeah.
is
No, no.
moving
I'm
In that direction.
I'm saying that's the one area where we can move ahead without the federal government's support. So
Yeah.
that's really critical. We can do that. We're not dependent on others. Although I keep on harping on the fact that the Spinnaker Point facility needs to be audited for energy too, and so far hasn't been.
Duly noted.
I think this third time I'm noting this in the minutes. So,
And so I'd like to just say too, that, the Enroll folks have been telling us, and I got an email today, that they have capacity until they don't, unless they disappear.
right.
Because they're all contractors. But for right now, they're there. And I did get an email today saying that they have capacity. They're taking requests for new technical assessments. And so if we were interested in getting an independent assessment for solar on some other city buildings, like, I don't know, DPW, maybe there's an opportunity down there.
Mhm.
They would provide us an independent assessment. I don't know if there's value in that or if that's a waste of time. But it's something for us to think about.
Sure.
If there are some other opportunities.
Right.
And we always said that this was going, we were gonna dip our big toe into the Enrail pool and see what they came back with.
Mhm.
I mean, the caliber of the people doing the work is first rate.
And
Yeah.
they have a whole practice that is waste to energy. And we've told Peter Rice and Eric over at DPW. And they've met with them too about, they do have skills and, you know, if the city is interested in tapping them for some of the PFAS removal. And some of those initiatives that we're looking at, Enrail is a free third party
Right.
to support that. Sorry.
No, I love this.
Counselor.
I was just gonna say, if we can do solar at their DBW facility, that would move us in the direction of having electric vehicle charging, which we don't have there. Part of the reason that we're lagging in electric vehicles on the city side is we don't have the facility to charge them. We don't have the power supply at DPW right now to provide that. So it would just require serious upgrades to the infrastructure there. But if we could drive that with solar, that
Mhm.
would be a
Mhm.
huge advantage to us.
Questions for her?
Good work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Counselor Tabor's been involved in this the whole time, so.
I think Jillian was on the call too, right?
Yeah. She's here.
I'm here, but I wasn't on the call.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so, but,
Oh, you missed a good one.
yeah. We had Peter Britz and Kate O'May.
That's right. We had
Were
Kate,
on
yeah.
that last call, yeah.
Okay. Lastly, Stephanie sent out the statements from CPCNH and their action plans. And I'll just open that for discussion. I think we,
Council, I found it alarming, to put it
Mhm.
mildly, that, I mean, I was only aware of the situation with the PPA and subsequent change in rates. And at the last meeting, we didn't get into it, but, you know, Henry had responded, and, you know, some of these things I just found almost comical. You know, 2 lessons learned. Second one is we should avoid negotiating with facilities that are insolvent.
Okay, check.
And then in conclusion, if this was a unique situation for the organization, then it would have been difficult to guard against, other than avoiding any and all suppliers that are on shaky financial footing. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, So, I mean, that aside, and then we hear in this latest information that they lost $8.5 million between, in the last rate period, not this rate period, last rate period, August through January. And had to draw down reserves to,
Right.
you know, address their financial situation. And I give them credit or kudos for, you know, some level of transparency of discussing what happened. Which I think is, you know, if the public actually read this, it would, I think, it'd be of concern. But they describe what happened, but not how it happened, you know, and you know, from my experience there between the Enterprise Risk Committee, which I was on, and I by far was like the least knowledgeable in procurement on that committee. There's some sharp people. The Finance Committee, Calpine, Ascend, et cetera. I just don't understand how this happened. And there's comments in here that they didn't know until December of 2024 that this was all playing out. So I find it hard to believe that it was just within, you know, one person's purview that this was all transpiring. So they made a point here to say how important it is to be transparent. I think there's got to be a little bit of transparency in terms of how it happened, because they're not really describing exactly how did we get into a situation where we had underwater contracts from August through January and lost $8.5 million.
Well, they do kind of lay that out. They just don't name names.
No, they say kind of what happened, but not how it happened, because there's all sorts of controls and guardrails, Tom, and they didn't really how, you know, they said they use language like I was reading it last night.
Deviation from adherence to the enterprise risk.
Right, and
policy.
non-compliance with the policy. Though that's what I'm saying. How did that happen? Because the people that are involved with that shouldn't happen. You know, there's controls in terms of how they go about procurement and what their policies are and how much hedging they're supposed to be doing. And there's hedging minimums, and, you know, they didn't have the minimum at times. And so they're pointing out, Tom, what happened, you know, where they didn't comply with their own policies, but they're not really explaining how did that happen. With all the eyes and the controls and the guardrails, I don't understand. And I'm sure it's explainable, but they're not explaining how it happened. They're just saying it happened, and you know, we screwed up, but not explaining how did it happen.
I mean, what I read between the lines there is that they would have to say who messed up. I mean, I think it comes down to individuals.
Right, but the process is not that.
Well, I agree, and that's
It's
probably
not the. I mean, the enterprise risk management policy and procedure they put together is like the Manhattan phone book. I mean, it is detailed, and there's so many different sets of eyes, from the internal staff to the board, to Calpine, Ascend, a very active energy risk management committee that meets, and the chair of that is very, very detailed. I just don't understand, with all the guardrails and procedures and controls that are in place, how this happened. And that's not even the power purchase agreement issue.
Yeah,
That's a whole separate
Mhm,
topic.
mhm.
But other than maybe we shouldn't be working with a project that's insolvent. But I would like to hear a little bit more, Counselor, in terms of how it happened. And even if it's, you know, I read somewhere, I went back and I was looking at minutes from some of the recent meetings, so I could see if I could. And apparently there's some report that was put together by Samuel Golding on the non-compliance, and it was submitted under attorney-client privilege, you know, to the board.
Personnel
So
matter.
my guess is there's more information in terms of how it happened, but, you know, I can't believe it would just be like, you know, one person who's not there anymore. Just too many controls in place.
The other thing it seems to me what you're saying too is, if we don't understand how it happened, then we can't avoid it from happening again.
My guess is they know how it happened.
Well, yeah.
But they're just
I'm
sharing what
guessing,
happened.
I'm guessing that would be the case.
They're just
because
saying we were
it would
not
be pretty
compliant.
foolish if you didn't guard yourself in the future.
You know,
against
where
it.
was the finance committee? How did
Yeah,
we
yeah,
not know
yeah.
you were underwater $8.5 million
Yeah.
until January? You know, where was the audit committee?
Yeah.
Where was the risk committee? What, you know, it's kind of the old, you know, who knew what and when.
Right.
So it's just, I think as a community that's a member of CPCNH, our reserves as Portsmouth's reserves have been drawn down now
Mhm.
because of what happened. And I don't have a real understanding of what happened.
Yeah.
You know, or how it happened. That's all. So I'll be quiet.
No, that's other discussion.
The model says that their model was not verified by external folks. They under collected. And then they didn't engage in transactions that they're required to engage in according to the policy. I mean,
Who
Hmm.
did that?
that's what this document says.
Mhm.
And I just remember sitting in those monthly energy risk management committee meetings, and they would be going through stuff with a fine tooth comb. There'd be questions like left and right. And, you know, between the staff discussing what was playing out and why, Calpine and Ascend, and I mean, extremely talented people. So I just, how this kind of just all, you know, and they're being very transparent that we've had a couple
Right.
major screw ups between the procurement last period and what they were getting into this period. And I just.
Yep.
From what I had witnessed there, and that's even before they brought in all this additional staff, procurement staff, they brought in some, you know, internal expertise beyond Calpine and Ascend. So I just, at some point, I think I'd like to hear
Yep.
a little bit more in terms of how it happened.
Counselor.
Yeah, I have some questions too. Like, has there been significant turnover on some of those oversight committees that we're reviewing so that we don't have the same level of review that we did? Has there been, has the growth been so quick that maybe there wasn't adequate training or communication put in place with new teams? So, you know, I guess it's not just a correction of making sure that we're following procedures and rules, but how did we get here in the first place? And where's the oversight piece that we're missing? And maybe do we need more in place? Do we need more individuals or a different process?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did lay out that they're doing, you know, the personnel, they're conducting internal policy compliance assessments, then addressing areas of non-compliance and implementing operational adjustments. So
They haven't had a finance head. They were relying on board person who worked her butt off as the treasurer. But she wasn't a finance person. And they brought on staff in procurement and all these other areas, but they did not have an internal finance expert. They had outsourced the accounting work to you know, just a group that's pulling together the numbers, but they have not had, and I think I read that I think they're recommending like a director of finance.
CFO, yeah. I mean, Kevin, from your financial background, did you see that as, I mean, who's got their finger on the cash flow? Who's seeing the revenue in from the billing, money out, paying the, you know, suppliers? And, you know, is watching the cash position certainly every month and maybe even more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of cobbled together. They have a bank, River City Bank, that they work with. They have the accounting firm that does their books. And they had the treasurer, who's a board member. And so it was a small cadre that I think, from all my experience, was doing a solid job. But
Well, there's a revenue model and a projected expense. But what's the actual? You know, and that's where your finance people are hopefully have their finger on that all the time. I mean, that seemed to me the missing piece. Was that you didn't have a CFO saying, this is our cash position. And, you know, that would be essential feedback as you're looking at either taking on a new town or making a power purchase agreement or anything like that. You know, you would have, if your reserves were eroding, you would have spotted that if you had somebody monitoring the cash position all the time. That was just my take.
How far behind does the cash reporting, the accounts reporting?
We're doing it every month. There's a bit of a lag based on the billing with the utilities and the cash coming in from the utilities. There's a bit of a lag in terms of unbilled revenue, but you know, all that gets reported out. You know, they had very detailed reporting from what I recall on a monthly basis. But you know, they talk about here some of their load forecasting was off, et cetera. But
Right.
I think it would just be helpful at some point for us to have a Henry or somebody just give us a little bit of the inside baseball here, just to put
Yeah, I mean, if,
else at ease that they got a handle on this and kind of a little bit more information in terms of how things transpired, because this was not a good series of events for their credibility.
well, RSA 91A does allow us to go to discuss things in non-public if it relates to personnel. So that's what we needed to do. We could do that. Is that a feeling of the committee?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Kevin. We should have a better accounting of what happened, and maybe Tom, you can kind of facilitate some kind of conversation with them to give us a little bit
Yeah.
more insight.
Or even if we don't, as a group, I mean,
Yeah.
Tom as a
Yeah, right.
representative and as a board member could maybe
He
get
could
some
communicate
of
with
that
us then,
and
yeah,
just
about
share
that.
it,
Yeah,
share
yeah,
it with us.
yeah.
Because it sounds like they're putting together a decent framework and plan for going forward, and they're being transparent in terms of what happened from a non-compliance standpoint.
Yep.
But maybe a little bit more information in terms of,
Yeah.
you know, how did the controls break down?
Right.
Because they went to great lengths to put controls in place. Great lengths.
Well, I want to be convinced that that can't happen again. Okay. So, I mean,
Yeah, that's simply put.
To the community, like.
Yeah.
that's
yeah,
fair
exactly.
to-
That's
to
our
get
job.
that back
Yeah,
for-
absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay. I also, but I do give them kudos for putting out a pretty transparent amount of information.
Yeah.
As they have to.
Yeah.
As a.
Yep.
As a cooperative.
My wife was asking, are people up in arms? And I said, well, no, I don't think they have any idea. I think they would be if they were to read all of this, but
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that it hasn't gotten a little bit more press, given the number of communities that are members now.
Yeah.
You know,
To it, and town meetings just happened. I think they got another 8 or 10 towns, including Bedford, which is a big town,
yeah.
Newington. So,
I think the next purchase is gonna be a big one. You know, for the next 6 months.
that'll be a bellwether. For sure. All right, so what I'm hearing is either through Tom or committee meeting with Henry, we'd like some more questions answered.
Yeah, I'll find out. I haven't seen the minutes. Wasn't able to make the board meeting last week. And Peter wasn't either. But there may be something in the minutes there that aren't out yet. Or if not there, I'll find out what I can at the next meeting.
I was noticing they also have office hours every other week, which are just open Zoom calls, so. if Anybody wants to get on those, that's available.
Okay.
Anything else on that? Okay. We have anybody for public comments? Deb?
Somebody, Herbie said Fred is on the sustainability committee. I can unmute you if you, or you should unmute yourself if you'd like to speak a public comment, Fred.
Good evening. Yes, I'm from the Sustainability Committee, and I'm not familiar with the term public comment or what is expected of me for this.
This is the portion of the meeting where anybody can address the committee on any topic, just your name and address. But if you don't want to and hadn't planned to, that's fine too.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm encouraged by what I've heard here tonight about encouraging community power and trying to look at better ways to deliver that through the utilities and state commissions, and also the possibilities of wind generation somewhere in the Portsmouth city limits. So I think that all be welcome news to the Sustainability Committee.
Thanks. Okay.
Counselor Tabor, do you have any more of an update on Jones Ave? Where we are?
When I talked to Karen, I queried the city manager and she said that Peter is working with an engineering firm. So it's underway.
That's great. Thank
I
you.
don't have any other update than that.
Thank you.
But I'd like to get a date for that.
Does,
Date certain. Yeah.
so does Peter's office have budget to engage in an interconnection study?
No, it's
I
us.
think Caroline, it's the login.
Yeah.
Let me elaborate. Not only do you have to have, you know,
Right.
engineering of the site and whatnot, you have to you have to contact the host utility.
Right.
And ask them to engage in some power flow studies to evaluate the feasibility and identify if there's any elements that are overloaded and or any upgrades that are necessary and a cost estimate associated with the upgrades. I think that'd be an important input into the consideration of the feasibility of the project. And unfortunately, there's a long
Waiting list.
waiting list and time associated with getting something like that
Yeah.
processed. So
Yeah.
the sooner we're able to scope out some of those important considerations, I think it'd be a good idea for us to try and do that.
Yeah, and Counselor Cook, you raised this too. And there's a cost to that. I think we learned from Exeter, it was around $35,000. So the question would be, would we want to go to the council and ask them to authorize that without knowing whether there's feasibility or not? And, no, I don't know what the.
Or at the appropriate time. Yeah, just exploring what the options for getting that study taken care of.
Can we at least take the first step of reaching out to Eversource to get a quote for what it would cost? Or is that something that they don't do before we engage in the study?
Oftentimes you enter into a design and engineering contract and you put a deposit up. And depending upon the hours of time required to complete the study, that's generally how it goes. Asking for a estimate associated with the interconnection study without getting into the power flows is kind of a chicken or the egg thing.
Okay.
And last I
try,
heard,
but-
you know, there was, you know, you could either tie in at the three-phase power at Jones Ave, where Incinerator Road starts, or the high school, or even Tidewatch. Tidewatch has a three-phase, I think, little substation. So that's unresolved at this point.
Ben, can I just ask you, when you say when we need to get in the queue because there's lots of people already waiting for this, is there a cost just to get into the queue? I mean, when we don't have all the specifics now, or do we need the specifics before we can get into the queue or ask for a study?
Great question. I'll have to come back with an answer.
Okay, good. Because otherwise, yeah, I agree with you. If we need to have this and there is a queue, we should probably get in line.
Right, right. Counselor?
And something, it's under the limit for the CIP budget. But we can put it in as a general budget item if we need to, maybe amending it in June when we get back to the
Right.
budget period. If we get there, if we determine that it's something that we have to sign a contract for.
Yeah, or maybe capital outlay,
Yeah, so
pay as you go.
So Counselor, I feel like Mr. Somsich asked a question. Is it the will of the committee that I go and explore this on behalf of the committee? I just want to be super clear because I'm, a little
Yeah.
conflicted.
I think we need to know where the engineers think we should tie in.
Okay.
That's my judgment. I don't know what you think.
But what I heard is the question was whether Ben can just explore if we can get on the waiting list while we figure that out, so we don't fall further back in the scheduling, which is already backed up. So I think it was more of a, can we just schedule ourselves free of cost right now, knowing that ultimately we would need to answer this question.
Okay,
An exploratory conversation.
yeah, I think we should loop in Peter Rice, though. And I'll do that tomorrow.
And Counselor, I would very much like Peter or somebody, member of his team, to come to one of these meetings and brief us. I know you're staying in touch with them, but
Yep.
we're multiple months down the road on this, and I'd like to hear from them in terms of what, kind of where they are, what their schedule, what's going well, what some of the challenges, et cetera. It'd just be a good, I think, topic for one of our meetings here. It's one of our two big efforts that we have going on as a committee, and I think it would be good for the full committee to kind of be at the same level of understanding and hear from Peter or whoever his, PM is or whatever.
Yep.
So just a thought, because it's an exciting project, and I'd kind of like to hear from those guys directly, guys and gals.
Is that the feeling in the committee? Yeah.
Yeah.
The committee is tapping its collective feet.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. I think that's a good idea. So I will talk to Peter soonest about getting on the waiting list and about coming to our May meeting. Tracy,
Just a reminder, there's another button-up workshop, New Hampshire Saves, April 21st at the library at 6 o'clock. We're posting it with the library.
Tracy, I haven't emailed you, but I'll definitely be there. Thank you for hosting it.
Perfect.
And it's at the library this time?
Yeah, we had too many technical issues with the remote. So that should be.
Betsy, welcome back. French wine may get very expensive.
I know I got a lot of requests to bring that and other items back. Yeah.
Anything else? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all. I'll see you in person next time. Sorry. Bye.
I thought she might not come back. I know.
Right.
I'm- I'll miss you.
Back in again.
They let her back in the country
Thanks.
Yeah.
with French.